into that account, basically. They pre-fund it. So all of this money is locked up all over the world that can be put to use in loans or a much higher yielding capacity. And that's why they charge you a pretty decent amount on wires to move money. This is still a loss for them at the end of the day because the opportunity cost of holding capital there is significant, especially if they're having to hold it in an inflating currency like the Turkish lira or the Argentinian peso or Zimbabwe, right? Like they don't even want to hold any currency in those jurisdictions. And that's really kind of where a lot of this started is, with XRP and ODL for Ripple, they've trialed and allowed people to settle into these jurisdictions without having to hold that counterparty risk of those currencies, right? They can settle real time between those counterparty banks utilizing XRP instead of pre-funding those accounts. But I think that'll become more prevalent, especially if there's more liquidity in the asset. But again, I don't know that it'll be Ripple that actually wins out. If you listen to Brad, he says he thinks, by 2030, they'll have maybe 14% of Swift volume at Ripple. Brad wouldn't just throw out a number. That's just projected.
We know, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Swift will end up adopting R3's infrastructure with Corda, which is a private permissioned ecosystem. It allows the banks to do what they want, build their own infrastructure, partner with them. If you look at the seed investors for R3, it was all the investment banks here in the US. They've only done one other round after that and haven't taken any more money. And again, that's probably because of the lawsuit with Ripple where they were awarded 1.04 billion XRP. But if they were to be awarded, the contracts with Swift for instant settlement, because Swift is a messaging system. They just adopted ISO 20022 globally. Again, like you talk about the shipping container, right? Like you need a standardized way to move data packets for all of the messaging alongside these payments globally. And that's what they've implemented over the last 4 or 5 years here. And that's the predicator or what would precede the ability to settle real time because you don't have to reconcile that information. You would know exactly which accounts it went to. So no networks themselves are actually ISO compliant. I hear a lot of people talk about that, but the technologies and messaging systems that have been developed on top of them or by these players like Stellar and Ripple are what is ISO compliant. And then they can utilize these distributed ledger technologies and the assets to settle real time. The primary settlement mechanism that R3 was originally intended for was XRP. They partnered with Solana to trial some things. I know there was people that talked about that here recently, but if there's enough liquidity in XRP and if there's legal clarity around stuff, which there is for XRP and these other assets are still waiting on the Clarity Act, if something were to occur, I think that R3 that were awarded those contracts or maybe even Project Ion, which they developed in correlation with the DTCC were needed, they would lean on XRP for the settlement of those transactions.